Hello everyone, good day. I am Narshin Gregorio and today we'll tackle about the elements of arts. First element is line. Line is defined as the path of a moving point through space. It is the most fundamental of all the elements of arts. Line is also the simplest, the most primitive, and the most universal means for creating visual art. We have kinds of lines. First is a horizontal line. It is a line that runs parallel to the ground and it suggests a feeling of rest, infinity, and perfect stability. So the horizontal line is associated with the body at rest and thus generally expresses calmness, repose, stability, and tranquility. So here are some examples of the horizontal line. And the next kinds of lines is the vertical line. It is a line that gives an impression of height and dominance or power as they pointing or extending towards the sky. And also it is associated with the body in upright standing position and generally expresses a poise, firmness, equilibrium, strength, and dignity. And here are some examples of a vertical line.
Diagonal lines. It is a line that conveys a feeling of action, movement, unrest, or uncertainty. The vertical line is associated with the body forward and charging purposefully towards an objective. It signifies energy, dynamism, impulse, willpower, aspiration, and passion as well as emotion. In geometry, a diagonal line is a straight line segment that joins two corners of a polygon, but is a knot edge. It goes through the middle of the shape. Outside of geometry, any line of a similar shape, angle, and inclination is also known as diagonal. The word diagonal comes from the Latin word diagonalis. Curved lines. It is a line that shows action, life, and energy. It suggests grace and beauty and associated with the body and movements that create a rhythm of curved lines in the space. Curved lines are aligned to feelings, impulse, spontaneity, grace, charm, play, eroticism, and sensuality. A curved line is defined as a line that is not straight but it is bent. Curves were initially known as lines. However, to create a clear distinction between the concept of line and curve, lines are generally called as straight lines. Now there is a distinction between straight line and a curved line. Zigzag lines. It is a line made from combined diagonal lines that can create a feeling of confusion or action. The word zigzag describes the shape of a line. A line drawn in a zigzag shape makes a lot of short, sharp turns. The letter Z is a zigzag itself, and a thunderbolt is also often represented as a zigzag. The first turn a zigzag line makes is called a zig, and the second is called a zag. Zigzag can also be a verb. Zigzag line in a line, course or progression characterized by sharp turns, first to one side and then to the other. Zigzag lines are a series of diagonal lines joined at ends. They can convey action and excitement, as well as restlessness and anxiety. Curved lines are lines that bend and change direction gradually. They can be simply wavy or spiral.
Good day everyone, my name is Jar Crespi Fernandez. I will be presenting to you one of the elements of art, which is shape or shapes. I believe all of us are familiar with shapes because everywhere we look in our surroundings, there are shapes. It could be the food we eat, the appliances we use, and everything within our grasp is made of shape. So by definition, what is shape? Shape means a two-dimensional figure which has length and width, formed within the ends of a line meet. In other words, it is created when a line is enclosed. Shape is one of the 7 elements of art and it has a variety of uses in the creation of art, just like this one in the picture. Shape is an element of art that refers to an area clearly set off by one or more of the other elements of art. It lays out the art we see along with other elements such as line and color that made up the abstract art. Now for the kinds of shape, we have geometric shapes. Look as though they were made with a ruler or drawing tool. The square, the circle, the triangle, the rectangle, and the oval are the 5 geometric shapes in art. Geometric shapes are those that are defined in mathematics and have a common names. So these shapes are familiar to us since we always encounter these shapes, and it's the most common shapes that are taught to younger kids. They have clear edges or boundaries, and artists often use tools such as protractors and compasses to create them, to make them mathematically precise. Examples of art that uses geometric shapes as an abstract art is Piet Mondrian's Composition 2 in red, blue, and yellow, 1930. So as you can see here, it is very evident that we can see common shapes. The canvas is small and uses only the simplest colors such as red, blue, yellow, white, and black, which is another element of art. So the composition is similarly reduced to the simplest of rectilinear forms, squares, and rectangles defined by vertical and horizontal lines to make it stand out. We have another example of an art that uses geometric shapes. This is the Theo van Doesburg's Composition 11, 1918. Composition 11, which van Doesburg painted in early 1918, features a series of rectangular planes floating on the surface of the canvas. Color is limited to subdued reds, yellows, and blues on an off-white ground, a subtle variation of primary colors and white. The artist arranged the colors and shapes so as to achieve balance, through an intuitive rather than systematic method. The second and last kind of shape is organic shapes. These are shapes that are not regular or even. Their outlines may be curved or angular, or they may be a combination of both, to make free-form shapes. While geometric shapes are well-defined, biomorphic or organic shapes are just the opposite. Organic shapes are individual creations of the artist. They have no names, no defined angles, no standards, and no tools that support their creation. They can often be found in nature, where organic shapes can be as amorphous as a cloud or precise as a leaf. Organic shapes are often used by photographers. We have here an example by Edward Weston in his remarkably sensual image, Pepper No. 30, 1930. The story behind this is during a 3-year sojourn in Mexico, Weston developed a friendship with the painter Diego Rivera, who taught him to focus on the sculptural form of natural objects. So as you can see here on Pepper No. 30, a familiar object has been transformed into a potent presence, meaning the curves and folds of the pepper suggest the flesh and sensuous contours of a human torso. Another example of an organic art is by artist Georgia O'Keeffe in her Cow Skull, Red, White, and Blue, 1931. O'Keeffe began taking regular retreats to Lake George, New York, and then to New Mexico. Her artistic interest shifted from the buildings of New York to the nature of New Mexico. In this work, O'Keeffe isolates a single skull, highlighting its jagged edges, burned surfaces, and bleached color. To O'Keeffe, such bones represented the desert's enduring beauty and the strength of the American spirit, which is alluded to in the striped background.
Okay, a pleasant afternoon everyone. My name is Christine May Fuentes, and today I'll be discussing all about the elements of an art, specifically about form, texture, as well as space and its colors. So let's define first what an element of an art is. So an element of an art is a stylistic features that are included within an art piece to help the artist communicate. So also, elements of an art has 7 elements, namely the line, the shape, texture, form, space, color, as well as the value. So let's now define what a form is all about. So form is an element of an art that refers to an object with 3 dimensions, namely the length, the width, and the depth. So length means to say ang haba, width ang lapad, and depth ang lalim. So I have here some examples about form. So in figure number 1 as well as in number 2, pag visible gani or makita nimo or imuhang ma-assess kung asa dira iyahang length, width as well as ang depth, that you are simply defining what a form is all about in an element of an art. So also, what we need to understand is that an art can be viewed from more than one perspective. So since lain-lain tag pagsabot sa isa ka butang or let's say sa isa ka artist, so or sa isa ka art itself, it could be na dili jud ta pareho og mga ideas when it comes to kanang observing or assessing it. So kuan na lang, sabto na lang po nato kasi lain-lain man ta og pagsabot, okay? Sabto na to ang matag usahon para wala maiwas away. Okay, so now let's proceed to space. So space, what is a space? So space is an element of an art that refers to the distance between, around, above, below, and within the things. So also, space can be both 2D or 3D. 2D, two-dimensional or three-dimensional. So you might be asking me, what is the difference between the two? So in 2D, or two-dimensional, it requires a large amount of illustration as every frame needs to be drawn. So, or while in 3D, 3D works with rigs, where 3D models is essentially given a skeleton that can be manipulated. So that's mainly the difference between 2D and 3D. It's just that dili na ko siya ma-elaborate fully simply because I am not an artist myself. Like literally kanyang into 2D and 3D dimensions. Okay. So, but sa brief explanation lang naman, mo ito siya ang difference ng 2D or 2 dimension versus the 3 dimension. So, also, it has been said that a space refers to the distance between, around, above, below, and within things. So, also, dili lang ka na ang basehan para makainguntan ang isa ka art piece, para makainguntan na ang space mo lang na siya ang dapat natong i-put in mind. Also, we need to include na ang background itself, iyang foreground as well as the middle ground, appeal na siya sa kung unsa ang space when it comes to art or element of an art. So, let's proceed. Ay, also, wala na ko na sulti na ang space has two spaces, mainly the negative and the positive spaces. So, when we say negative, para sa figures, sa figure 1, makita nimo na ang painting na siya two faces nagatbangay pero ang middle niya empty. So ang kanang empty space dira mao na siyang ginatawag na negative, whereas ang kanang two faces kanang gi-occupy niya nga space nga naay black nga color mao na siyang ginatawag na positive spaces. But it doesn't mean nga negative siya, wala na siya pulos. It doesn't also mean nga since siya ang positive, siya ang naida kong effect. No, kasi actually both negative and positive space can play essential roles in the overall success of an art piece. So meaning to say, ma-negative or ma-positive na siya, na siya iyahang sariling pulos. Okay? So now let's proceed to the texture. So what is a texture? Texture is an element of an art that refers to the way things felt or perceived, whether smooth ba siya or rough. So, as how they might feel if touched. So, ma-assess nimo siya directly, not just only by by kanang by sa paggunit nimo sa iya, but also by seeing pwede po nimo ma-assess kung unsa ang texture sa isa ka art piece. So I have here some examples of the different or textures of an art. So sa figure 3, para siyang drought. So in my own point of view, makaingon ko na kada siya rough texture yun siya, whereas kaning sa figure 2 kaning brown ng color, smooth ni siya na texture kasi by the looks of it kanang medyo murag kanang smooth siya ng tanawon, but in figure number 1 it can be smooth and rough at the same time. So nga nasulti na ko to kasi smooth siya kung tanawon nimo siya sa inyong ana art piece na siya, pero siguro kung tanawon nimo na siya personally, of course naa siya dako kay nga factor. That's why nasulti na ko siya nga rough kasi kanang by nature ang bato dili man jud na siya yung ana ka fine. Common sa mga bato daghan siya mga buslot-buslot, so kung gunitan nimo ng bato, it could be a rough jud siya. So that's why sa akong own point of view, it could be rough or smooth depending as to how you would see it kung personal or through kanang picture lang. So let's proceed. Lastly, we have the color. So in color, ang color naman relies on light. So also it refers not only to the hue meaning color, but also to the value, which means the amount of white or black in the hue, intensity, or brightness. So also this refers to the product of the light of different wavelengths reflected off the objects. So meaning to say, para mas ma-define nimo or mas maklaro nimo ang color sa isa ka subject, light plays a very big role to it. So simply imagine na lang nato kung wala kay nakita karon na example, do na may example dira, but kung dili nimo siya makita, i-visualize na lang nato. Let's say nagwa kag picture gamit imo ang cellphone. Now, kung ang isa nimo ang imuhang subject or ang imuhang gusto kuhaan or i-capture na picture, naa siya gwapo na lighting. Meaning to say, hayag siya, naa siya kanang proper lighting, ang dili ka against the light. Obviously, ang imuha ang outcome ana gwapo jud, matingkad ang kulay, kaya di ba? Bright iyang color. So that's that's where intensity nagapasok. So intensity naman meaning to say na ang intensity itself na siya duha ka category. Mo ni siya ang high intensity and the low intensity. So ang iyahang ang difference between the high and the low intensity, color is strong and bright, whereas kung low intensity, color is faint or dull. Since kaganiha na stressed out nako na ang color magdepende or ang naan naga-play og dako kaayo nga impact ang light sa pag justify sa color. So again, kato sa picture, kung nagkuha kag picture sa iyaha or sa isa ka object, so kung nagkuha ka og kanyang picture sa isa ka subject, see to it na gwapo dapat iyahang lighting. I-consider nimo ang iyahang lighting as well as ang kahayagon, kay para ma-emphasize jud nimo ang every small details nga gusto nimo ipaabot sa imuhang mga viewers. Kanina man ang example sa low intensity, usually pagka nagbitawng night mode, tapos syempre dili kaayo ana kagwapo ang lighting nato, especially kung ang gamit lang naman nato isang atua lang namang cellphone and wala ta sa studio. So of course that's where low intensity takes in. So ang outcome niya, it could be faint or dull iyahang color. So That ends my report, and kung naami, if you have questions, you may ask it later. The moment mahuman ni discuss tanin sa ang topic. So that will be all, and thank you all for listening. Have a great day ahead.
Good day everyone, I am Yula Marie Gamos and I'm going to discuss the kinds of balance together with Teacher Shirlene. We will discuss three kinds of balance: the formal balance or symmetrical, informal balance or asymmetrical, and radial balance. Now that we already know the elements of arts, we can put that all together to form balance. First, let's define what is balance. Balance is a principle of art concerned with arranging elements so no one part of a work overpowers or seems heavier than any other part. It is also a visual distribution of weight through color, texture, and space. Balance helps makes an image feel stable. The factors that influence visual weight will be discussed by Teacher Shirlene later on. So now let's move on to the first kind of balance. We have here the formal balance or symmetrical. It refers to two sides that are identical to each other. The halves are mirror images. The key words for this is identical to each other. This can be in a form of shape, color, texture, and many more. So we have here the three types of symmetry. First is reflection symmetry. Reflective symmetry, also known as mirror or bilateral symmetry, is when a shape or pattern is reflected as true in a mirror along a line of symmetry. For example, remember the butterfly. The design of its wings is an example of asymmetrical balance found in nature, where all of the opposing shapes and colors are counterparts of one another and are in perfect proportion. And such near-perfect symmetry has always been considered as aesthetically pleasing. It gives a feeling of stability of form and structure, but also a piece of harmony. So secondly, we have here transitional symmetry. This type of symmetry occurs when repeatedly used the same type of visual elements in different parts of the composition. Repetition is what carries the symmetry, and the best example of this type of symmetry is the beehive. We observe the repetition of the specific shape. Third, we have here glide reflectional symmetry. Glide reflectional symmetry is much like transitional symmetry. Okay, so when you move a pattern a given distance in a given direction and then reflect it over a mirror line so that it has exactly on top of the original pattern. That pattern has glide reflection symmetry. Also, a common example of this is the footprint in the sand. So now let's move on to the second kind of balance. This is the informal balance or asymmetrical. Two unlike elements seems to carry equal weight. Two halves are mirror images, and two slides that are not identical to each other yet equal in visual weight. So the keywords for this is unidentical but equal in visual weight. Asymmetrical balance happens when you organize the composition in a seemingly chaotic way and yet a sense of balance is somehow still present. So for further discussion, Teacher Shirlene will discuss the factors that influence visual weight.
Thank you, Teacher Yula. Now, before we go to the 6 factors that influence visual weight, let me introduce first myself. Hi everyone! My name is Teacher Shirlene May Olaker. So, let's start first with the first factor, which is the size. It is when there is a large shape or form that appears
heavier than a small shape. So let's imagine that there is a painting, then in the right side, the large shape or the large form will be located, and in the left side will be the small shape. So through this, we are balancing the two even though they have different sizes. Next will be the contour, in which there is an object with a complicated contour that seems heavier than the other one with a simple contour. Next will be the color. So in the color, there is a high intensity colors that have the most visual weight. Fourth factor will be the value. Here in the value, the stronger the contrast in the value between the object and the background, the more visual weight the object has. So it means that the object has a bigger or lighter, the bigger and lighter value than the background itself. Next factor will be the texture. So what is this texture? So the texture is when the object with a rough texture seems heaviest. So if you see a painting that then the object is, you can see it that the object is much heavier. The last factor is the position. So it is a small object far from the dominant area of a work that can be seen just as the heavy as a large object close to the dominant area. By taking this weight difference in account, artists can create works that appear naturally balanced. And here are the examples of asymmetric balance. And the first example that we have is a very well-known painting by Vincent van Gogh, which is the Starry Night in 1889. As you can see in the picture, the dark triangular shape of the trees visually anchoring the left side of the painting is counterbalanced by the yellow circle of the moon in the upper right corner. The next example that we have is the Boating Party by the American artist Mary Cassatt in 1844 to 1926. It is another dynamic example of asymmetric balance with a dark figure in the foreground lower right hand corner, balanced by the lighter figures and particularly the light side and the light sail in the upper left hand corner. Now let's go to the another balance that we have, which is the radial balance. So what is the radial balance? Radial balance occurs when the elements or the object in an artwork is positioned around a central point. So radial symmetry is often seen in nature, as in the petals of a tulips, the seeds of a dandelion, or in a certain marine life such as a jellyfish. It is also seen in a religious art and sacred geometry, as in mandalas and in contemporary art. Thus, radial symmetry has a strong focal point. We must always remember that a radial symmetry is a what? Very good. It is a radial symmetry has a strong focal point. But we must always remember that not all symmetry in art and design is based on a balancing in the left and in the right, because there are some symmetry just like the radial balance, in which in the radial balance it relates to elements that spread out from a central point. So when the visual weight of those elements is eventually spread, the result is radial symmetry or balance. So here are examples of radial symmetry or balance. First is this mosaic from the Jame Mosque of Isfahan in Iran. It is arranged around a central point. There are stars and flower shapes radiate out from here. The design is very symmetrical, but the level of detail and sense of shapes flowing into each other keeps the composition interesting. While as you can see in the picture, our second example, which is the Varasattva sand mandala, it is a radial symmetry that creates a sense of order and harmony in this Varasattva sand mandala. Although different colors and details are used in different directions, the geometric shapes grouped around a central point create an arrangement that feels perfectly balanced. And in our third sample, which is in the third picture, The Sun by Edward Munch in 1911 to 16, it features a symmetric balance in the shapes used to show the rocks and the shoreline. But the painting is dominated by a radial symmetry created by the lines of sunlight that spread out from the bright center and fill the entire frame.
Hello everyone, I hope everyone doing fine. Our group has been assigned to the elements of arts and the principle of arts. I was tasked with discussing the following topics: variety, harmony, and emphasis. I hope you learned something from our discussion. Let's get started.
Before we get started, let me introduce myself. My name is Nicodine Tiamenea. One of principles of art is variety. It is the principles of art concerned with combining one or more elements to create interest by adding slight changes. It also refers to the diversity of work of art and produced to prevent monotony and uniformity in the design.
As you can see to the picture, a design principle focuses with a variety or contrast. In a work of art, variety is accomplished by using varied shape, size, and colors.
Next principles of art is harmony. Harmony is a principles of art concerned with the blending elements to create more calm, restful appearance. It is achieved when all the design elements and principles work harmoniously together.
While looking at this image, consider it an illustration of a principle of arts that observe harmony, a technique merging similar parts in an artwork to emphasize their similarities. It achieved through the use of repetition, modest, progressive alterations.
Next principles of art is emphasis. Emphasis is a principles of art that makes a creation stand out by giving more attention to a certain parts and giving importance to a unit or area. It also makes one part of an art dominant over the other parts.
As you look at the picture, the way the pieces are combined to emphasize the distinction between them and to focus a certain area of the picture. And it's observed the emphasis element of art.
Hi everyone, I am Ma'am Joy and I and Ma'am Aya will talk about rhythm. So what do we call by rhythm? Rhythm is a principle of art concerned with the repeating elements to make a work seem active or suggest vibration. Also used in art and design to describe a relationship between element that provides a sense of balance, patterns, interactions between colors and shapes, and repetition of lines and forms are all examples of rhythm. So here are the three kinds of rhythm. Number one is regular rhythm, Number 2 is irregular rhythm. Number 3 is progressive rhythm. So when we say regular rhythm, it is the repetition of elements that are evenly spaced. It's a work of art that has repeated parts in a predictable order or arrangement that can be measured. Windows or tiles that are regularly spaced are instances of regular rhythm. It also shares a similar visual phases or pools or themes. They all have the same amount of space between them. A consistent rhythm is formed by a bricks of wall. The best example of regular rhythm is brick walls. So here are my tips to overcome the advantages and disadvantages of regular rhythm. So here are the advantages. Advantages is it is plain, simple, and easy to create. Number 2 is the rhythm is predictable and consistent and gives a calmness. So for the advantages of a regular rhythm is it may not be interesting if it is overdone. Number 2 is it might be monotonous. And number 3 is if there an exception of regular rhythm, it is easily noticeable by the viewer.
Good day everyone, I am Ayajin Gidokos and I'm here to report the 2 parts of rhythm. Actually, we have 3 parts. The first one reported with my group mates, and I will be reporting the 2 parts of rhythm. The first one, we have the irregular rhythm, and the second one, we have the progressive rhythm. So now we will discuss the irregular rhythm. Irregular rhythm is a motif is variable in size and spacing. Then the rhythm is said to be irregular. An irregular rhythm feels natural. Example, trees. Trees growing in a forest have an irregular rhythm. Each tree is unique. Some are thin and some are wide, but they are all trees. So irregular rhythm is also what we called a flowing rhythm. Flowing rhythm are created when organic shapes or forms are repeated, or where repetition is irregular. This result is sense of movement or flow. So the example that I can provide is the design of William Morris trellis wallpaper of 1864. As you can see in the picture, there is also a flowing rhythm in natural, just like the curving shapes of the stem and the branches of the climbing plant. As you can see of the bird, flower, and leaf branches, these lead the eye around the irregular repetition. So, by that, you can see the flowing rhythm around that pictures, because the organic shapes and the forms are repeated. And now, we will proceed to progressive rhythm. A progressive rhythm describes an artwork that contains repeating elements in a pattern that change either in size or color as they repeat. A sequence is created in which the elements are changed slightly every time they are repeated. Some progressive rhythm examples including the building blocks arranged from smallest to a largest and spirals. So the example that I can provide is the artwork of Edward Charles Legris of 1910 and entitled X-Ray of Nautilus Shell. As you can see in the shell, is made up of series of identically shaped sections that grow larger as they spiral out from the center. The regular way these shapes change creates a progressive rhythm. The second example is the artwork of Marcel Duchamp of 1912 entitled Nude Descending a Staircase. This features progressive rhythm created through repeated but changing shapes and lines. By trying to capture the figure flowing down the stairs, Duchamp avoids creating one specific focal point. Instead, the viewer's eye follows the movement of the figure from the top left of the canvas to the bottom right. Although the shapes are abstract, they suggest the changing posture of a walking figure. The consistent use of limited color palette of yellow and brown ties the shapes together. They read as one developing moving arrangement with progressive rhythm. Now, we can describe, or we already know the difference between the irregular rhythm and the progressive rhythm. The irregular rhythm is all about sizing and spacing, while the progressive rhythm is talks about the size and the color of the artwork. And also the irregular rhythm feels like a nature. That's all, and thank you for watching. Let's